Okay, so butter churning.
No one's going to sit down.
It's
Sit
wet.
on the wet log.
I really want to make butter.
Well, everybody needs to have a turn. Okay, and I'll start you off, and everybody can take a turn. And what you want to do is you want to slightly turn it, and you want to go up and down like this. And that will agitate the butter, and that's what we want to do. Okay, so everybody just do that. And it's already starting to get thick, so this is good.
So did they have wristbands to prevent carpal tunnel back then?
No, they just made the kids do it, and then they didn't have to worry
God,
about
that's
it.
it. I'm developing an ergonomic butter churn, and I'll set myself free.
Okay,
Because I want to know how to be able to make my own butter from, if I, ever.
Well, first you milk 1,000 cows.
Okay.
That's the first thing you want to do. The first thing, well, when I do kids groups especially, I say, what's the first thing you need to do to make butter? And the first thing you need to do is to milk the cow. And then you want to take that milk and put it in a large bowl and put it in a cool place for 12 to 24 hours. In that time, the cream will rise to the top. And then you'll use a slotted spoon to skim the cream off the top. And that is what you use to make butter, the cream. Now what is left is skim milk. Very little butter fat is in that milk that's left. The next thing you need to do is you put it in the churn. Now some people would heat it up. They didn't know what bacteria was, but they knew that if you heated it a little bit, it would last a little bit longer. They started figuring these things out. You would just churn. You would keep churning until it became butter. It could take as little as 20 minutes. I've done it as little as 20 minutes. Or you can, it could take an hour and still not be done. It depends. A lot depends on the temperature too. It should be around 60 degrees. So if it's too cold, it takes a really long time for it to eventually turn into butter. If it's too warm, then it never really hardens up, and it's a very soft butter, but you can still use it. And actually, for our purposes, it's almost better, because when we go to spread it on cornbread or the bread we get, if it's really hard, all it does is tear it up. So it's almost better for our needs to have it a little bit soft. Now, it's starting to feel thick. Someone else come and try. It'll start to get a little bit thick. You know what the consistency of cream is. When it gets thicker and thicker, and you'll be doing it, and all of a sudden you'll start to hear splashing. And it happens like that. It's just amazing. And what happens is the butter, the fat globules come together and form the butter, and then what's left is buttermilk. Now, it's not the cultured buttermilk that we buy in the store today. It almost looks like skim milk with teeny little pieces of butter in it. And that we've even used for cooking up here. And we have one woman who volunteers who loves to drink it. I mean, she just, it's great. Well, it's good. I mean, it's good.
It is good.
Yeah, it's low fat,
It's not a
too.
souring.
Oh, it's not that kind
It's
of.
not soury.
No, it's not like the buttermilk you buy in the store. It's not thick. It's very thin. It's not anything like that. You can't go to the store and buy milk from the store and try to separate the cream out of it. It's just not going to happen, because that milk has been homogenized. The fat globules have been broken up so much that they will not come back together again. So you just can't. That's why we have to buy the heavy cream. Another thing you can't do is and all milk, of course, today is pasteurized, which means heating it to a certain temperature to kill the bacteria. It does not need to be boiled. It just needs to be heated to a certain temperature, and it kills the bacteria. And this makes it last longer. But when you do that, you can't make things like sour cream or cottage cheese or things like that. Milk, yeah, milk will go bad, but it will, the cream will go bad, but it won't become sour. You can only do that with raw milk. So you can't do, there are certain things that you can't do unless you have raw milk. The reason that one of the reasons they made butter and one of the reasons they made cheese, it was a way of preserving the milk. Milk does not last very long time. But if you make butter or cheese, it can last much longer time. We do not add salt. Some people add salt. If you're going to keep it for long periods of time, You add a little salt. That helps to preserve it. Some people like the taste with a little bit of salt. I was saying before that depending on what the cow eats, if the cow's been eating grass, the carotene will make the butter more yellow. The cream we use, we usually get a kind of an off-white kind of butter, and it tastes fine. Back in the 1880s, they had butter color that they would put in. Now, I'm not sure what that was, but there are many references to
I don't want to know.
butter color. I know one of the things they did was when they were heating the milk, or the cream, they would grate a little carrot into it, and the carrot would color the cream, and then they would strain that out, and so they would have yellow butter. Okay, when the butter is all done, technically we need to wash it. We don't do that. When our butter is done, we use one of the butter paddles, and we usually strain the buttermilk into a pitcher, and then we scrape the butter out and put it on a plate, and then we squeeze it with one of the paddles. There's also this type of a paddle. It's called the Dutch hand. It has little grooves in it, and it helps to squeeze some of the buttermilk out also. Now, you want to get as much of the buttermilk out as possible, or it will sour the butter. Our butter is eaten so quickly that we don't have that problem here. But when they would do it, they would try to squeeze as much of the buttermilk out as possible and wash it maybe with cold water, maybe up to 3 times, and keep squeezing the butter. It's almost like kneading it. Some would use their hands. Most would use paddles like this. And you would keep squeezing and kneading the butter until all of the liquid was out. And then you would pack it, maybe in a butter mold like this. 1 quart of butter makes 1 pound of butter. 1 quart of cream, get my terms straight, 1 quart of cream makes 1 pound of butter and a pint of buttermilk, approximately. And we've been told that Mrs. Walker made butter and sold it down in Boulder, and that she had a little rose inside her butter mold. Now, this works in that you pack the butter in tightly and then push it out, and then you have a block of butter. Okay, if you didn't see what the dasher looked like, I usually like to have one of these on hand to show people what it looks like, so you're not constantly opening that because it gets dusty and you get dirty in there. So you can show them what the dasher looks like. Let's see, are there any questions? I can't think of anything.
Would it be unsalted, or would that just depend on?
It depends. If you were going to keep it for a long time, if you wanted to preserve it, you would add some salt, and that would help to preserve it. They also would pack it in tubs and then put salt and even salt water on top to preserve it. The Walkers used the spring house. It was kind of their refrigerator, I would think, because right above the water level, it's cool. And the way I explain that to kids is in the summer, when you throw water on yourself in the summer and it evaporates, it cools you off. The same thing with the spring house. The level right above the water is cooler, and so you could store your eggs and your milk and your butter there. You wouldn't want to keep it in the root cellar because it would absorb odors, and there were a lot of things in the root cellar that might produce an odor. So you wouldn't want to do that.
Does it absorb salt if you pack it in salt?
Well, you work the salt in, and then it's...
Oh, you work.
You work it in. You can work it in, and then you could also put it on top to preserve it, and then you can scrape it off. Salt was used for a lot of things, and brine, which is salt water. How's it feeling?
Now that you can tell from one.
Oh, it's getting very thick. Somebody else needs to do this.
Now, other than the color of the butter from what the milk cow's eating, is the best tasting butter come from a certain grass or a certain something? Do you want to keep your milk cow away from something because it's going to make
Well,
the butter?
you would want to keep them away from like wild onions and because it would affect certain things. And actually, there's I have this book, and the pages that refer to the butter making have been copied and are at the at Lower someplace.
At the Agricultural Heritage Center, at
Yeah.
that volunteer room.
And it mentions a few things about what not to let the cow eat, and it tells you what cows are the best milkers, and you can get really detailed. Most people, it tells you a whole list of cows. Most people don't care. Most people want a few interesting facts, and they want to try it. And make sure you do with any of these things, both the butter and the laundry both. Don't just ask the kids. Ask the adults, because they really want to try it. But sometimes unless you ask them if they want to try it, they won't say anything and they won't come up. But they want to try it too.
What's the technique? Up and down and spinning?
It's up and down and around. You want to agitate it, and you want to get, so you're going back and forth like this. You're trying to go back and forth like this. Young men especially want to pound. It's not good for the dasher. And what it actually does is it splashes the cream up on the sides, and then there's nothing on the bottom to churn.
So that whole container just has.
It has about this much on the bottom.
And is that what you usually do? You usually just fill the container to a minimum like that, or could you go?
If you're going to do it, if you're going to do it at home, and you can do this with, and you can tell people this too. Get a peanut butter jar, a mayonnaise jar, fill it a third of the way with heavy whipping cream. And that gives it enough room to be agitated. And actually, a jar is much more interesting for the children because they can actually see the visual. They can see it changing, and it gets real thick, and it coats the outside of the jar, and then all of a sudden it's clear, and you can see the stuff inside. It's fun for the kids to do.
So Diane, when you have some event days and things like that out here, do you actually have a milkable cow out here from which you will? You just
Not me.
have to
I'm a city girl.
Okay. Well, if we have a cow here and I'm milking it, I bring it to you.
I don't think there are milking cows here. I think they have steer.
Well, I ain't milking no
No.
steer, I'd
No.
tell you that. That I will not do.
It's in the training manual, you gotta do it.
They definitely don't
I think
like
they
it.
had one like the
Tell you, that
first
won't
couple
fly
of
me.
years.
I don't know if that will work.
That's under other duties as a son.
That's right. Recruit more volunteers.
It's easier just go to the refrigerator and
Yeah.
take the quarter cream out. And
Have you ever made it with goat's milk or?
I had someone ask me that question, and I didn't know the answer. So the next time I went to the farmer's market, I went to the goat lady who owns Haystack Goat Farm. And I asked her, I said, can you make butter out of goat's milk? And she said, you can, but the fat globules are so small and so dispersed in it, it takes a very, very long time. And then it smells like goat. It smells like goat cheese. It's not the same.
Yeah.
So you have to really like that taste and only have a goat available. But yeah, you can make. I did find out.
Goat butter. Okay.
You can make goat butter.
You can make yak butter.
You can make goat.
One thing about this discussion is one thing we want to keep in mind. It's not necessarily the end product that we're after in any of these activities. It's a process. So we can't get stressed out if all of a sudden we don't have a product for a certain group of people or whatever. It's more explaining the process and having them actually participate.
Yeah, I've seen volunteers just churning away and nobody's around. They're churning away, and you don't have to do that. You want the people to have the experience of churning the butter. And if we get some at the end, tell them, come back in a little while and maybe we'll have some. And then we can taste it. But
Can you stop the process along the way?
we've not finished it here, and I've taken it home and
Oh, really?
and started again and
Oh,
done
okay.
it.
Okay, yeah.
So I didn't know what else to do with it.
Well, I was just thinking if you get like an ebb and flow with visitation,
Oh
with
yeah,
visitors and
no,
stuff
that
like
doesn't
you
bother
can-
it at all.
Okay.
That doesn't seem to bother it at all.
And that's for the public events. For the school days, it's a little different. We do finish the process, so at the very end,
We try
everyone
to.
can try a little sample.
What do you have it with? Like Johnny cakes or something? Salty.
Our special Walker Ranch cornbread recipe, our secret recipe, which you'll probably learn about next week. And Karen Steele will be here, and she does this really cute. She calls it the butter. I don't know if she calls it that, but I call it the butter globule dance. And when she has the third graders, she gets up and she has other kids get up, and they just kind of go in circles and bump into each other until they form butter. It's really cute. If you're into that kind of visual thing with kids, you'll have to ask her to show you because it is cute.
She's an ex-school teacher.
Yeah, so she's really good with kids.
Wonderful. That sounds like a good game. You get all the kids laughing.
Yeah,
Kind of
And
break the tension. with
breaks,
them a
yeah,
little
it
bit.
takes some time too, if you've got some time to do it, so.
I was thinking about it for our next backyard barbecue. Myself.
Everybody, let's make
Hey everybody, the butter globule dance. Let's do it.
Come on, okay, Tom.
Okay, get rid of that visual.
Okay, are there any other questions?
If only I just turned the video camera.
Yeah.
Do the dance. Do the dance, Tom. Do it again.
I can't do it again.
It's kind of one of those spur of the moment things.
Yeah, it is. It
Lost
is.
forever.
Yeah, I've lost the moment.
Okay,
No, I
well,
don't think
it's-
I'll be forgetting that in a long time.
We know, we saw. Okay, maybe we can take this down here, and while I'm explaining the laundry, we can keep working on this so we can actually taste the butter at the end.
Stay out of her way a little bit.
Okay, this is laundry. This is another big favorite with the kids, but again, ask the adults if they want to do it too, because they usually do. Margaret Lindblom, who did your clothing talk, she taught me how to do this, and she said, if you interpret right, you never have to get your hands wet. So that's a good thing to think about, because on a cold day, you really don't want your hands in there too much. We usually have socks for the kids, and maybe some towels and things. Not all of them are 1880 socks. But the tubs will be filled with water. Now, to get the water, we actually have an 30-cup electric coffee pot in the granary, and this is how we heat water. It's just the fastest way to do it. And we also usually have pails on the wood stove, and we're heating water that way too. So if you need water, what you need to do is get the pail, go into the granary, dump the hot water into the pail, and then put more water into the coffee pot so we can get, always have hot water running, because we also use it to wash the dishes during the event. Put a little water in each of these. Have the people come up and take a sock, wet the sock. You put it on the washboard. Then you take the soap that the mice have not eaten, because the mice have been eating our soap. And I'll tell you why in a minute, because there's a logical explanation for it. You want to rub the soap, have the people rub the soap on the sock. Always put the soap back up here. Flip the sock and then rub up and down. And tell them when the soap suds start coming through, you know the sock is getting clean. That's what you want to do. You want to get the soap suds going through the article of clothing so it gets the dirt out. When they scrub, they should be standing behind it like this. The really little kids may have to stand on the side. But this is the way you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to stand behind it and do it. Then you can have them, if you want, you can have them put it in here. And this is considered our rinse water. This is an agitator. And when there's water in here, and you move it up and down, it has the same action as your washing machine at home. It makes the clothes go around like this.
It sounds exactly the same too.
Yeah, it just, but you have to have a certain amount of water or else it just splashes. But the kids usually end up pounding on top, and it just, it's not that important. So that's your agitator. The next thing you wanted them to do is to bring the sock over here. This is unstable. So you need to have one of the volunteers at the laundry needs to be standing and holding this. Put the sock in for them, because if they get their fingers caught in here, it's going to be a lot work. I always put it, and then just be careful. Have them hold this, and then turn with this hand. And then their sock will go through.
What are those rollers made out of?
Rubber. And on a hot day when you've been working it a lot, you can smell the rubber.
And one volunteer is allergic to it.
Yeah,
The rubber?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, it just gives her
Oh, latex.
red hands.
yeah.
So when was rubber first used in something like this? Was it first in the 1880s or when?
Oh no,
Well,
I
it's
would
been
think
around.
right after the Civil War or earlier. I know that you see in those old catalogs, in the Sears catalogs, you see rubber hoses. So, that's a good question.
How long has the train line been up there? Does anyone know?
As long as the work.
The train line's been used to Boulder out here.
Been there since
18.
Yeah, it got to Boulder in 72 or 3.
Okay. So if the train goes by, we can go, oh, if the drain again right on time or something. Like that, we don't have to go, pay no attention to that.
Yeah.
I'll give you a little talk about our first person versus third person.
Okay, when they put the sock through the roller, they have to take a clothespin and hang it on the line. You can see the two posts up there. Usually the line for the event is strung out there. This is the way we're set up today for school days. One of the things you want to tell people is that they started very early in the morning on a Monday morning. Usually Monday was wash day, Tuesday was for ironing. They started very early in the morning. They had to get the water from the spring house. They had to boil the water. Some of the clothes may have been soaked overnight, but they would start with the least dirty clothes, usually they're whites, and then work up to the dirtier clothes. This thing is called the battling stick, and one of the last school group I did said, that was in Willy Wonka the Chocolate Factory, and Willy Wonka's mother took in laundry and had a battling stick. So that's a reference anyway. The battling stick was used for stirring and boiling water and very hot water. It was used for lifting clothes. It was also used for really heavy clothes, like their work pants and things. They would get the clothes soapy, put the clothes on a tree stump, and then beat it. And again, the beating of the clothes would bring the soap suds through the fabric. And that's the way they would get clean. It wasn't thrown it on the clothes, but...
I was going to say, it looks like it wear that fabric out.
Yeah, well, they probably used it when they had to. I was talking before about the soap and the mice eating the soap. If they had the ingredients to make the soap, they would do that. You needed hardwood ashes. Up here, there's a lot of pine. It wouldn't have been good. But if you had hardwood ashes, you would save the ashes from your stove in a barrel, and you would have several barrels, usually. Then you would, when you got the barrel full of ash, the wood ash, you would put water in it, and you would keep adding water slowly. After a while, it would come out the bottom. You would unplug the bottom. There would be a hole in the bottom, and out would come lye. Lye is very, very caustic. It would burn your hands if you touched it. But if you mix the lye with rendered fat, so if you butchered animals and you had fat, you cooked that, or if you had fat from cooking, you could use that. You mixed it together in the right proportions and cooked it the right amount of time, and they knew these recipes, and there are some recipes in some of the books we have that made soap. They would pour it into a wooden box because they couldn't use tin, it would rust. They would pour it into a wooden box and then cut it into bars. Sometimes, if they didn't cook it right, they'd only have soft soap. They'd still use it. If it cooked really well, they had very hard soap. It was kind of hard in the water. They might grate some into the hot water and make soapy water that way. So I think the reason the mice are eating this is because there is animal fat in it. But the lye probably isn't doing a whole lot of good.
Felt some little low.
Yeah. This is called a flat iron or a sat iron. Looks like anything in Boulder. That's what they're named after. It's quite heavy. They would have at least 2, 4 if they could afford it. The reason they would have 2, anybody want to take a guess?
Straight off.
Keep one on all the time.
Yeah, one was on the stove heating up, and the other one they were using. A lot of them had wooden handles that you could hook on. This you would have to use a pot holder with to hold it. But I'm going to pass this around because you've got to. I mean, a lot of people don't iron today because it's too much work.
Oh, boy.
So that actually takes some of the work out. It's still have a heavier iron. I
It
found.
presses it.
I don't know how well they work. They iron everything. I mean, they ironed their sheets, their pillow, they ironed everything because there was no permanent press or anything. Clothespins, if you couldn't afford to buy clothespins and you had a little boy, he might whittle you some clothespins. This book has a lot of information in it. I'm not going to even start to give you the information because it'll blow you away. There's several pages on the laundry. And this part in here tells you what stain on what type of garment and what to use to get it out. And it's really interesting. And this book is also in the library at the Agricultural Heritage Center. And you just look under laundry. And it's interesting because they even tell you what foods not to cook. don't cook certain foods on wash day because you have to watch the food too much, and so you need to make something more simple. So you don't want to make food.
Peanut butter and jelly.
Well,
Our laundry tastes
but it was interesting that they had certain foods. Don't make this and don't make that because you're going to be too busy doing the laundry.
You think with all the work they have to do, that, I mean, I can understand pressing or ironing your Sunday best or whatever, but with the rest of the work, like sheets and work clothes and stuff, it's interesting.
That's
Was
why
it
they
just
had
a
children.
Yeah.
Victorian?
It was just a
Proper.
Well,
It's
I
just
mean,
the thing to do.
by this time they were the domestic sciences. I mean, and the way your home looked was a reflection on you. So you wanted to do things nice. You wanted to have nice things and do things right.
But some of them didn't even own sheets. They just had
Well-
blankets, and that was it. You had a quilt.
Were the walkers, if we could make a parallel to today, were they, if I could put them, were they kind of upper middle class, or were they working class, or?
I've always considered them middle class because there were times when he was doing really well and there were other times when he was having to sell off property. So I'm thinking, kind of in the middle. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah.
They were doing all right, but they weren't necessarily, they had sheets.
Yeah,
I don't know.
don't really know.
I would hope so, but no.
Well,
Who knows?
they had a teacher that
Sometimes.
stayed with the kids,
Yeah, like
so that was a
teachers.
little more well off because a lot of them were just homeschooled by their mother or whoever was in the town that was the smartest. Dame schools.
With a sock, I don't think you can begin to appreciate the work involved. Would you run shirts and large articles to something that small?
These make this.
Oh, you can
Yeah,
adjust them.
they open and close them a little
But
bit.
still
I don't
getting
know
a
if
big
these
old
work
shirt through
anymore.
there, so it'd be kind of.
But,
It's the
yeah.
buttons that you'd worry about
Yeah.
because my mom said there was a certain way that you folded
fold
it
them?
to put
Yeah.
them in there so you wouldn't break the buttons.
And the heavier things you would hand ring. You would, hopefully there'd be at least two of you that one could take one end and one the other and just ring it. So,
I've actually done that.
Tag out.
I've done all of my clothes by hand
Have you?
for like 2 months at a time.
Wow.
And it does, if you get a rhythm going, but it does take time. It takes a couple hours to
How
do.
often
3
change
days
the
worth of
water?
clothes.
when it gets dirty.
I mean, just look at it. It's out.
We didn't do it with pails though. We had a masonry door, and it had a little it had a rim around it and like a hole that went in that drained it out, so you could just pour a little bit of water at a time, and then you rinsed it on there too. So you did like a whole pile of stuff on the soapy board, while everything was soapy, and then you use up most of your soap because it's really hard to get soap out of clothes. And then you would like pour the water on it slowly and try and drain anything out.
And availability of water
Yeah,
has something to do
water's
with that too.
huge.
Now,
didn't have
would
water.
they use that soap on skin? For skin? Would they use that soap for washing? Same
Yeah,
soap?
this is, yeah.
Yeah, just that lye and ash.
The lard
Maybe lye,
lard
not
neutralizes it. I mean, you want a little bit of acid because that's what cleans.
Cleans it.
Yeah.
This is, because the mice ate our homemade soap, I went out and got some Fellas Naphtha, which is, you can buy it at King Soopers, but it's a lye soap. And the kids were complaining about their hands, so I ended up putting a bucket of clean water at the end so they could rinse their hands because, I mean, there were actually, after I bought it, I read the whole label and there are cautionary things on it about, so we may have to go to
Castiles would
maybe
be better.
Ivory or something if we can't get homemade.
Castiles is a milder soap that they would use. They would use less lye. It would be more of a soft soap for washing.
Dr. Bronner, just use that. Yeah, I think you can get Dr. Bronner to the cake soap too. I've seen.
Yep. You can.
You can?
Mm-hmm.
So that'd be something.
Yeah.
How often do you think they would wash? I mean, they'd have their aprons.
Mondays.
Yeah.
Huh?
Mondays was
Monday.
generally wash day.
Mondays was wash day. This book says that some people would wash, if they had more clothes, they might only wash once a month or quarterly. You'd have to have an awful lot of clothes.
But did they wash everything, or did they just wash the layer of the 18 layers?
Take a bath.
They might just do that.
You have to take a bath once a
might
month.
just do that.
They're not.
Yeah, it's probably going to depend on your activities, too.
Inside and outside layers.
If in the summertime, your clothes are going to get a lot dirtier than in the wintertime. You're not perspiring as much, or you're not working out in the yard as much, and things like that. It's like you have the hip tub in there. You tell the kids about the hip tub and how, okay, they fill it with water, and then they start with the least dirty person, and everybody would share the same bath water mug. But, you know, what do you have to do? You have to go to the spring, you have to get the water, you've got to heat the water, and, you know, water's
At 4
always
Mile
been precious.
Ranch, I had a
commodity, I
toothbrush
think.
that anybody could use.
Now
It was a
that
guest
has
toothbrush. Anybody
that has a nice scent to it. I suspect something was added to that.
Guest
in the
toothbrush.
store.
Could have been.
What about
4 Mile
homemade? Just
Ranch in general.
They wouldn't have, but they could have. They knew. I mean, there was. You could buy store-bought soap that had perfume in it. So if they wanted to, it depends. You know, it's always individual. You know, some people are going to want the basics. Some people are going to want something a little more special, and what you could afford and what you wanted. But both were available. You could get basic. I think it was 5 bars of soap for 12 cents back in the 1880s. Oh, and the one thing I didn't tell you is if you didn't have hardwood ashes to make your soap with, you could go to the store and buy a can of potash or lye and use that along with your own rendered fat from your animal. So you could still make your own soap if you wish to. You didn't have to have the hardwood ashes.
Which they would do after butchering,
Yeah,
because you'd use the pig fat.
and I think it's hog fat makes a whiter soap and beef makes a more yellow soap.
And you can make a simple soap with olive oil and Crisco and lime.
Really. You may have to have a soap making class one.
It was
And,
fun.
and just like blacksmithing, it's so wide open to all different types of things you can interpret.
'Cause
Same with the
background
laundry.
life
First of all, you have them and they're in a line. They're anxious. You know, they're waiting. I mean, I started going into, last time I did this, it was just happened to be the week that Levi's pair of jeans came out that was being sold at Christie's for $25,000.
Huh?
And so I started talking about the history of Levi's jeans and, or, you know, butchering. You know, that's a whole
Butchered.
different
Aspects of soap making.
soap making that the kids are kind of enraptured by, you know, that topic, and so you have them right there. Another good thing is, like Alan said last week, is you would think that this would be, on the grand scheme of things, relatively boring, but it's not. These kids will do it over and over and over and
Little
over.
boys love it.
Oh,
And then the mother will say, "Well, darn it, Johnny, why don't you do this at home?" You know.
Yeah, exactly.
They like the ringer.
Right.
The little boys like the ringer, the mechanics of the ringer, for, you know, and they just get really involved with that. But
I put a washboard in my classroom, and they just all want to. I mean, my dog clothes are the cleanest. Let me tell you.
One thing that sometimes they'll get a little carried away, and you'll see them trying to put their sock in the dirt, and
then your water gets.
it gets
real
dirty enough, so we try to dissuade them from doing that.
dirtiest one goes last. Just like,
Like taking a bath.
yeah, dirtiest one goes last. Now, when you're doing this for school days, you need to be able to say, you know, tell them all this information. But when you're doing it for the event, you don't want to start at the beginning and go through the whole thing for every person that walks up, or you're going to be burned out at the end of 15 minutes. Give them a little information, and then they'll ask questions, and then you can answer that question, and it may lead to something else, and other people will hear. But don't try. Most people don't, you know, most people don't want to hear it all. They just want to see it and do it a little bit. And those that do want to know will ask you questions. Because I've seen volunteers try to interpret the whole thing like they do at school days, and it's impossible. It's impossible. So.
School days is a little bit more controlled because, you know, Alan or whoever takes half the kids right when they get here. Generally, it's 60 kids, and half of them, boom, are on the tour. The other half is split into 3 different little subsets, and one will do laundry, one will do butter, and the other one will do the inside of the house. So it's much more, like Diane said, it's not like the big event where people just kind of wander up at will. It's very controlled by watch during school days, so it's a little bit different. So you have a set time with them, so you can kind of do your spiel, and it works very smoothly.
Okay. Any more questions?
Did you want to mention about the clothespin? Little boys had to whittle for them.
Oh, I did.
Oh, yeah.
I think I mentioned, yeah.
And
if you
what
have a
that
little boy,
tub
they
is
might
really
whittle
for?
Clothespins. What?
What the tub is really for, that the clothespins are in?
We're going to get a basket for the clothespins because this is actually for making bread. We just not too long ago realized that myself.
It does work.
And that piece of fruit picture that has the buckets.
Oh.
Obviously, it was made for that.
It was. This is a wash stand, and the ringer was on here. It was part of it. And if you look, you can see it was sawed off. So what probably happened was the ringer broke. The wash stand was still perfectly fine. So they cut the ringer off. So,
It folds up, which
Yeah.
in a house, a small place, that's kind of convenient.
each side goes up, and then you just stick it in there. So it's really neat. I mean, it's neat.
Because otherwise you'd have to put all those things on the ground.
Bend over all day.
Well, then we have the
Before you have a big kettle on your fire.
And when the press is here, never turn these buckets like that. Always have it.
because I'll always get that mistake.
Yeah.
Or the label itself. That label's been partly taken off. Yeah.
Yeah, get the barcode on it.
They used those in the 1800s, didn't they?
Most people are very forgiving when they see something like that. They have imaginations, and they know these are reproductions.
I mean, you can just look right at the power line is there, and it's out the window.
Yes, this is part imagination, right?
So the proper technique on the agitator would be right in the center.
Just right in the center, and you go up and down, almost like butter churning. But
So
and it does. When the water's at least halfway up, and you put a couple of socks in there, and you do this, it looks. I'll even start to do it. I'll start working it, and I'll have because now look in here. What does that look like? Does that look like your washing machine at home?
No, because
Yeah.
Mom won't let us open it and watch it when it's working. You'll fall in.
Cockeyed thing will shut off every time you open it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can take a screwdriver. Put
But the
cap
great
in.
news is, it sounds exactly like your machine.
It does.
Exactly like.
It does.
The only one that ever came up, that I remember, the only machine that ever had that kind of an agitator in it was the Frigidaire. It had the up and down
Up and
agitator
down.
in it. They had
Aren't they going back to it though? Because they're finding that it's
Yeah.
better, and not the back and forth that
the
the other.
Whirlpool one's got that little tiny agitator down at the bottom.
Now the clothespins looks pretty straightforward, but is there a technique for those clothespins? And
Well, the kids have no idea. They've never seen a clothespin before.
Right.
So they'll take
even
this up
even
like
the
this.
newer style.
Yeah, with the
And
spring
they'll
on
hold
it.
it underneath, and they'll try to put it on. So I have to tell them, put the tip over, and then you put it in, and that way they'll hold it. So, you get a lot of socks on the ground, but they just get washed again.
Right.
Recycle.
It's getting kind of thick.
Is it? Oh, good, good.
Anyone else want to have the defining moment of the
I don't
cream
know, it's
turning to
green.
butter? It's getting there.
Do you want to quickly do
sprinkly.
your next thing, or?
Time to rinse.
I think
What you call a second rinse.
Second rinse.
second rinse.
We will get to the wood demonstrations on Thursday.
Okay.
And then, right now, for those of you who haven't been here, I'll give you a quick little tour of the place.
Cool.
And we can just put this stuff back in there.